It's the 13th day of March. I'm going to be your host tonight. It's 2024, by the way. I'm Dana Durnford. I'm also known as the nuclearproctologist.org. And you can call in to this pathetic show at 709-589-4406. Hope everybody had a great day. So we're going to cover Fukushima news cycle. This is the 13th anniversary. And, you know, they picked up 30 million one-ton bags of radiation. The official story is nothing got out. The International Atomic Energy Agency's Director General Grossi is in Japan to review the Fukushima wastewater strategy and enhance nuclear collaboration. So we got a poll tonight, as you're probably well aware. Should the International Atomic Energy Agency Director General Rafael Grossi be dropped into a volcano? I think it's pretty darn Somebody accidentally voted no. Aw, that sucks. Don't feel too bad, it happens. Rafael Grossi, who leads the International Atomic Energy Agency, also known as the Genocide Omnicide Machine, and his visit holds significance as it's the first inspection since the onset of the wastewater disposal in August. It's the first since August. But in 2013, the BBC put out a video. We're going to play that for you. And all the tanks were full. There was 1,000 of them in 2013. And almost every single one of them were full.
The Fukushima plant sits smack in the middle of an underground aquifer. Deep beneath the ground, the site is rapidly being overwhelmed by water. Beneath the surface, water flows downhill and into the basement of the damaged reactor buildings. There it is contaminated with high levels of radiation. To stop the groundwater flowing on into the nearby ocean, engineers are building an underground barrier. But that is causing the groundwater level to rapidly rise. It's now so high the water will soon reach the surface. Then it will start flowing overground into the sea. This week, the company that owns Fukushima, TEPCO, made this disturbing admission.
We understand that this water discharge is beyond our control, and we do not think the current situation is good.
Outside experts say it's now clear TEPCO is incapable of handling the cleanup at Fukushima. It's time for the Japanese government to step in. The situation is already beyond what TEPCO can handle, he says. If it were possible to take proper measures, they would have done it already. It's not as if TEPCO is refusing to do what they can. They're doing everything they can, but there are no perfect solutions. Even if the government does step in, it's not clear what it can do. The only other solution is to pump out the contaminated groundwater and put it in storage tanks. But after just 2 years, the site is already jammed with more than 1,000 giant tanks. Most of them are already full up. At least 400 tons of new water pours into the site every day, and it's going to continue for years and years. Fukushima's water crisis has only just begun. Rupert Wingfield-Hayes, BBC News in Tokyo.
So in the first 2 years, the tanks were all full. So what's Rafael Grossi talking about? What was interesting about that is they said because of a barrier. Wait for it. I'll bring it up for you in a second there. So there is no barrier. There's still neither one there today. Lying is just a way of life for these monsters, these demons. Damage to nuclear facility leading to multiple nuclear meltdowns. And it's unusual to see those with the S, the plural, and the accumulation of radioactive wastewater. This is not wastewater. This is lethal by the liters. Japan can finally release Fukushima water into the ocean. 2-year UN review concludes this was last year. We have to recognize that such a thing has not happened before, he said, adding that Japan would have the final say on the release. In other words, they're not an authority, they're not a regulatory agency. But it has happened and it's never stopped. You know, the buildings are actually destroyed. And every nuclear scientist has seen that, academic, journalist, would have known that it had hemorrhaged constantly into the ocean. I had launched research expeditions for 6 years, 4 to 5 months a year on the ocean without coming home. And species are actually wiped out. In fact, if you go back and look at, say, 2014, because you hear these stories about the polar whales, or it's natural for them to beach themselves in groups, right? But in 2013, 2014, 2015, and 16, the whales were always reported as having empty stomachs, were emaciated. They had starved to death. And those 25 whales, there was more whales in the Everglades that they also had empty stomachs, polar whales. But, you know, we have mortality events for all whales. There's over 7,000 humpback whales now dead. We covered that earlier the week, right? There's 12,600 gray whales. They were all emaciated, same as the humpback whales were all emaciated. There was 1,000 culvert beak whales in different stages of decomposition, but the ones where they can do a necropsy and animal autopsies, they were emaciated. There's the killer whales were all emaciated, the fin whales, and the sperm whales showing up everywhere in groups. All of these whales are, we've never seen that pre-Fukushima. Fukushima contaminated soil, so there's over 105,000 storage sites with 30 million one-ton bags. 105,000 sites of one-ton bags where they scratched up the surface a few centimeters of 3% of the land that they were trying to clean, which was where they were hoping evacuated communities where they wanted to trick and manipulate and deceive and coerce people into going into the nuclear wastelands. This story from last year, International Atomic Energy Agency says the public's trust is the key to the projects using the 30 million one-ton bags. They want to grow food in it. It's just, like, if you're having a conversation with somebody around a table without the information in front of you, no one's going to believe you. By the way, the International Atomic Energy is not a regulator, not in a position to judge or approve Japan's. How can you recycle radioactive waste and then grow food in it? You should turn on Japan with everything in your soul. Disposing of the Fukushima contaminated soil. So the same scenario is playing out in 7 other prefectures besides Fukushima. And so I highlighted them on a map right here for you. Okay, so the official little story is not even got out until August the 24th of last year. This is June 24, 2015, where they reported on a plume model showed 1 million atoms per square meter over the west coast. 1 million atoms per square meter, and an atom is pulsing energy every second. That's known as a Becquerel, a BQ. So that's pulsing at almost 186,000 miles per second per square meter. So children with over 11 atoms per kilogram, 11 decays per kilogram per second of just cesium, this is a single isotope, will start to see heart problems. So what about when you got 1 million covering every square meter of your country like America and Canada? So 20 million particles are considered hot. These are nasty. You much rather get an atom or a radioactive isotope in your body than a hot particle. A 131 per liter fell in the United States during post-Fukushima peak. But hot particles, which is what we're talking about, hot particles bombarded the west coast of the United States and Canada, contaminating farms and some food sources. Like, what are you talking about, some food sources? This was symmetrical plume covering the entire planet. It contaminated everything. West Coast hit with 220 million atoms per liter of iodine-129 in the rain. 220 million atoms. And 50 atoms causes irreversible heart damage for children. There was also 1,500 of, this is the 129, so that saturated the thyroid glands of all the species forever, right? And so they're producing radioactive hormones, and that will be the end of the species. There's no other way to recover from this. Irreversible heart damage for children with 50 atoms a kilogram of cesium-137. Yet there's also 1,500 atoms of radioactive sulfur, which is the peroxide hydrogen buckyballs. These are hot particles because the sulfur, where we're spraying it on the 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, is liberated from the water as sulfur, and the sulfur becomes spherical balls, and the balls are able to ingest uranium, plutonium, the curium, the americium, the neptunium. The list is very long. And now you have a super hot particle that's very mobile for very long past its normal half-lives. But 50 atoms per kilogram, 50 decays per kilogram, in humans lead to irreversible lesions in the vital organs. The aerosols were so great that the radioactive aerosols in Washington were 100,000 times normal, September 10, 2011. But another study the following year, June 7, 2012, showed it was actually the xenon-133 in Washington was 450,000 times above detection levels, and these numbers persisted for weeks, so everything was saturated. This is one of the models of the xenon, by the way. But 11 becquerels cause serious heart issues for children. 50 is permanent damage to their hearts. For adults, 50 atoms per kilogram will cause permanent lesions to their organs. Because nuclear radiation is the most carcinogenic thing that exists. Radiation levels on the U.S. West Coast spiked to 1 million times normal to 10 million, which was the French study. And you know how conservative the French actually are. And this was the cesium-137, which pulses energy almost at the speed of light, 600 feet. This is the Japan mouthpiece, NHK. Fukushima radiation still circling the globe. The levels are consistently rising and falling in 40-day cycles. So you see the plume coming out, but eventually, within about 20 days, the whole planet is covered in radiation. But that plume never stopped coming out. That's still hemorrhaging out today. So an invisible plume that covers the entire planet and never stops and never goes away and never stops pulsing energy at the speed of light. Deteriorating plant threatens mass extinction around the world. It does that because this invades the planet in about 20 days and never goes away. And it compromises the integrity of all the species. It attacks their stem cells. It attacks their hormones. They become radioactive, and you have mutated hormones and mutated stem cells. What do you think ultimately the results of that's going to be for every species? U.S. West Coast bore a significant brunt of hot particles, like the 20 million particles of iodine-131. 50 particles per kilogram in humans lead to irreversible lesions in the vital organs. So when you got 360 plus atoms sequestered in the testicles of the males each day, what do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going to happen to the insects and the birds and the small mammals and the animals? Because they're thousands of times more vulnerable than we are. And they're like, nobody has, or nothing out there, not even bacteria or fungus, has an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. And then you got these degenerate, disgusting, parasitic, revolting monsters known as the International Atomic Energy Agency. A recent statement by Rafael Grossi, the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, this was last year, said the future of nuclear as an alternative energy source, the future of nuclear, period, relies on the success of Fukushima releases, the hoodwinking of humanity. That's what the future of nuclear is dependent upon. Everybody buying into Rafael Grossi's story. So remember, the tanks were all full.
But after just 2 years, the site is already jammed with more than 1,000 giant tanks. Most of them are already full up.
You had 1 million atoms of krypton-85. You had 20 million atoms of iodine-131. You had 220 million atoms per liters of the iodine-129. You had 1,500 atoms of sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs. You had 100,000, and then updated 6 months later to 450,000 times detection levels of the xenon-133 that burns a hole through your lung. You had cesium-137 at 1 million to 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air. You had 360 atoms of a different study of the radioactive sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs. So you had krypton-85, you had iodine-131. These are studies now. You had studies showing 220 million atoms of iodine-129 with a 15 million year half-life. You had sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs. You had the xenon-133. You had the cesium-137. And so when you put that together, and then you still deny what's going on, and so anybody that denies this at this stage, once you see the documentation, And, my research expeditions were 4 to 5 months a year. I used to be a commercial diver. I'm very methodical in the work that I do. And it's not a game. This is not a game. This is an extinction event. And to have parasites like Rafael Grossi and International Atomic Energy Agency doing what they're doing is almost too much for me to bear. So, they're saying nothing got out of these buildings, and what did was equal to 3 grams of sugar. Where do we draw the line? Shouldn't we dumping Rafael Grossi into a volcano? TEPCO is unable to bring the contaminated water issues under control. 2014. The tanks were built hastily to hold highly contaminated water. And that the advanced liquid processing system in 2014 April, 3 years, 1 month later, had yet to function. Not reliably, yet to function. And it was the same thing with the REVA system. 6 months after this, it still didn't function. There was nothing function.
But after just 2 years, the site is already jammed with more than 1,000 giant tanks. Most of them are already full up.
The tanks were filled in 2013, folks. Russia, because the media is not going to cover Fukushima, then they're going to get everybody to look at Russia. They had all the superstars signing declaration of ban of nuclear weapons, and now the next day they're going to follow with this propaganda campaign. And so you can see NBC, Al Jazeera, Reuters, Associated Press, CNN, Political, Financial Times, CBS, France 24. These are all the big medias, right? USA Today, Al Jazeera again, CNN again, Reuters, NBC, ABC, CBS. You got The Hill, CBS News again, Time Magazine, and CNBC, DW's, the Haaretz, which is the scumbag Israelis. Bloomberg, you even had the Canadian Halifax. Forbes, Wall Street Journal, the Times Colonist, the Barron's, the National Review, the Quantum Commodities Intelligence. You had U.S. and News and World Reports, ABC Chicago, the New York Times, the CNA, the ABC Philadelphia, the Hamilton Spectators. Nobody mentioned Fukushima on those sites, by the way. And then they had to roll out somebody salacious, and they already got a useful idiot. We've covered him numerous times. The puppet backs nuclear strikes in 5 NATO member states. NATO's not even supposed to exist. It was created as an opposition to the Soviet Union because the American military couldn't handle it. And so they need a massive coalition. And so when the Soviet Union was destroyed, NATO should have been dropped down into a volcano, shouldn't they? But because they had enormous wealth and power and influence, they need wars to exist. NATO can't exist without wars, right? It needs a permanent boogeyman like North Korea, which attacked nobody in 70 years. And 50 years before that was occupied by Japan. So for 120 years, North Korea only got a chance to fight for its freedom a single time. And the United Nations went in and crushed them when they changed their name from League of Nations to United Nations after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They used more ordnance on North Korea than the entire World War II theaters on that little tiny speck of land. There's tons of American media that will do the same thing for the current administration, right? Government of Canada announces $50 million for Ontario expansion of clean, reliable, affordable nuclear energy. and they used the word clean 31 times in that story. 31 times. 31 fucking times. Imagine saying nuclear fusion for the grid is coming much sooner than you think. Because they need investors all the time. And what the hell are they doing on the stock market without a product? It's called a Ponzi scheme, right? They're no closer today than they were 50 years ago. And 50 years ago, they were no closer then than they were in 1904, which is the exact same design they're using today. There's nothing new. The design that they're working on is a 1904 design. You know, the wind speed here yesterday was 8 kilometers from the southwest, but the wind gusts were 45. So these supercell storms that we've never seen before, only post Fukushima, coming ashore at over 150 to 200 miles per hour. What do you think the wind gusts of those suckers are? It's caused by Fukushima pulse event, right? 80 years of nuclear fallout and then a massive pulse event. Why did you build the reactors where you get a 3,000-year history of massive tsunamis and an endless history of 1,000 earthquakes a year? Why would you build it right close to the tectonic plates on top of that, where you know it's going to slip? You know it's going to happen. You piece of shit. Nuclear power has gained more acceptance as the trauma of Chernobyl and Fukushima disaster fades. The only thing's fading is the species due to Chernobyl and Fukushima. You know, Chernobyl is irrelevant in the scope of Fukushima, but Chernobyl was so bad they closed 9,400 farms in Ireland and Scotland. They closed the freshwater fisheries in Sweden for 30-something years. 30 years. The amount of congenital malformations worldwide skyrocketed. Autism, Down syndrome skyrocketed. The fight against climate change, the incredible arrogance to suggest that nuclear has some redeeming qualities when it comes to climate change. It's not gaining ground worldwide. What are you talking about? Like the media, everything nuclear, every single story is just endless lies, and we challenge as many lies as we can, but we actually can't keep up with the many lies that they tell every single day. We try. Goodness knows we tries. Oh, there it is. It was there. I forgot I posted it. Here we go. So what is the difference in renewables versus nuclear? You can go read this story from the 21st of January of this year, and they peek back at 2023 statistics. So in 2023, nuclear power suffered a net loss of 1.7 gigawatt capacity, a little over 2 large reactors. But renewable had an additional amount to a record 507 gigawatts. 507, which is equal to about 725 large nuclear reactors. So let's just say our whole grid was renewables. And this is a 12-month we're talking about. We've done that kind of number. So the wind is always blowing in 75% of the country. The places where there's doldrums are very, very rare. They're very rare, right? A doldrum where the wind doesn't blow. But if you put lots of renewable like wind in the mountains and lots of solar in the deserts, like the grid is all connected. We don't live, pre-Nikola Tesla where we needed a power plant every mile, right? We have Nikola Tesla created the transformers that allow us to move electricity almost indefinitely with little loss. And so if the whole grid was renewables, and we have a doldrum in our our 50 square miles or something. Well, there's tons of energy still available from the rest of the country to keep the grid perfect, right? Because if you create lots of extra renewable, and it's easy, 725 large nuclear power plants equivalent in renewables in a single year, and we're not even trying. The predictions in from 2020 to 2026 was that renewables would surpass gas, oil, and coal and nuclear, the consumable, which is around 4,800 gigawatts. And so every year this number just jumps dramatically, but it's being held back. It's being artificially slowed down. The price of commodities since the false flag of Ukraine and Russia, this is a staged event to drive commodities up worldwide. And the only reason nuclear is still in the conversation is because of the Russia war has inflated the cost of renewables. And then when we banned, and I produced a video that same day when United Nations countries, because they run the world, you don't have a country anymore. United Nations runs your countries. The 195 biggest countries are ran by United Nations. United Nations says jump. The 195 companies don't come back down until you tell them. And so when he said you have to ban all commodities from Russia, no one said how we're going to replace it. Everybody said, yes, sir. And inflation now has destroyed everybody I know. The commodities, nobody can even afford to buy a pepper for a salad anymore, or a lettuce for the children, or they can't even afford to go pick their children up from school anymore because of this agenda of hate against everybody, because they never held them accountable. You refuse to hold them accountable. And it's the simplest thing we can do is hold them accountable. There's more than enough of us. Once we start raising our voice, we win. But look at the evilness, the absolute stupidityness. The media out laundering a moron, a newcomer, an idiot, a bird brain, plants seeds of hope for Okuma, which is a nuclear wasteland. Not a difficult return zone like the shit for brain moron Japanese say. It's a nuclear wasteland. They have 40 million 1 tons of bags of radiation in the opening there on top of that. And the community has been abandoned. And they manipulated a few people to move them back in. So Fukushima, you can see right there, Okuma is on one side of the nuclear plant. Fukushima is on the other side. They're both joined onto the nuclear power plant. They're in a nuclear wasteland. So a man new to the Fukushima prefecture is creating an orchard in Okuma. Like, what are you growing food in a nuclear wasteland for? These are all guaranteed, these are abandoned areas. Yeah, and they trick people into going back. Like these little spots of white and yellow, they open up and said, somehow is magically safe, as if the radiation never stopped coming out, and as if the radiation is not airborne. Like those areas, like you see Kono's house up there. You can't cross the street. It's too radioactive. It's too radioactive. Like, you're not even allowed to stop your car. You shouldn't be there. It's absurd. If I wrote a book like this with these attributes, no one would have, pre-Fukushima, I would have been laughed off the planet. The industry is so evil because there's not a single person out there, or there's not enough people out there to make them think twice, have become the persona of evil, a threat to everything. And the world sits in silence. I can't comprehend it. I can't comprehend it. I haven't stopped for so long. And I work like a dog. And the people that are censoring me are destroying humanity. They're not destroying me. I'll never give up. But they're destroying humanity, the 8 million species, and their friends and families and their loved ones and themselves. So they can what? Have a job censoring Dana. It's not stupid, it's absurd. It's too stupid to be called stupid. It's absurd. To help revive its agricultural industry. Like, this is one of the biggest medias in Japan talking about a nuclear wasteland, an actual nuclear wasteland. And they're all out this useless shit for brains to sell the story to the gullible idiot that sits in front of their TVs and consumes this. You got to be a gullible idiot to sit there and consume that. I only do it because we have to. They roll out a good-looking young man, I would imagine. And then that makes it okay for him to poison everybody. Like, the media should be calling him a monster and calling for police to stop this monster, stop this animal, stop this murderer from growing food in a nuclear wasteland. No, let's put him on a pedestal. Let's give him all kinds of airtime. Let's bring in the crew and let's put him up on a pedestal on the TV in prime time. And he even admits you don't know what he's doing. And he's perfect, isn't he? That's perfect for a degenerate industry like nuclear / International Atomic Energy Agency. I'm surprised Rafael Grossi's not there giving him a reach around. Like, how do we ever get to this stage where an idiot is the one who gets in the news and is considered the good person? How did we get this fucking backwards? How does that actually work? And if you turn the camera to your left slightly, you'll see Fukushima nuclear meltdowns that are still melting down. Like, you can't go to that house, for instance. This is an exclusion zone. It's only a little fraction of that community where they let people go into because they needed that so nuclear didn't get a total black eye every time someone mentions its names. Like, you got to be an idiot, a real idiot, to think that anywhere is safe. Like, this community has 14 million of these one-ton bags of radiation. 14 million. The community is surrounded by it, and the radiation never comes out. Newcomers plant seed of hope, and they keep that there in the lower thirds. 105,000 sites like that. Do you really think the community that's been abandoned for 13 years right alongside the town has any redeeming qualities? I can't wrap my mind around it. I can't believe there's not a million people with baseball bats trying to knock his head off. And Rafael Grossi's too. It's hard for me to comprehend how Rafael Grossi has been able to walk through an airport and then a mob of people have him tore his arms and legs off on sight. I just can't comprehend it. And the media is someone that you would think a natural inclination would be to spit on the minute you seen them and call them scum and tell you they're out of sight. How could that not be your natural reaction to these monsters, these sadistic demons, these genocide, omnicide machines? How does that actually work, I wonder? No. Let's put the most stupidest, most ruthless, the most genocidal people up on a pedestal. They're the good guys. Rafael Grossi should go there and mark on all of these 1-ton bags that Dana is wrong. He should go there and play hopscotch across all these areas and say Dana is wrong. You should go there and mark on the 30 million 1-ton bags that Dana is wrong. Dana is wrong. Every day, all day. Dana is wrong. Fukushima is safe. And so you get the most vulnerable of society. The media puts them on a pedestal. They're all happy and, oh, you stand over here, you stand over there. Everybody smile. We're going to go live. Okuma residents should be like moron. Moron goes back into a nuclear wasteland. They should be ridiculed. They should be ostracized. They should be defended. Anybody disagrees with me, go down there and mark on all these millions of 1-ton bags how wrong I am. Sitting outdoors in a nuclear wasteland, eating your lunch. And the traditional way of sitting in Japan, there's several 8 different ways, right? All of them are stupid. Some of them are meant to hurt your legs on purpose so you don't become a threat to the host. Fukushima melted reactor still on clear conditions 13 years later. Like, what are you talking about on clear conditions? Why don't you show us that picture if you're going to talk about reactors instead of the tsunami? Why show us the pictures of tsunami when you're talking about melted reactors? Why not show the pictures of melted reactors like this? And then say conditions are unclear. And everybody will yell at you and call you an idiot, right? Whole towns were wiped out and the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant was destroyed, creating deep fears of radiation that lingers today. Yeah, it should linger for, not linger, it should be a phobia for a billion years. It's nuclear meltdowns, for goodness sakes. It'll be here long, the effects will be here long after the human experience. Futaba, the town hit, the hardest hit town, Futaba. The whole planet is the hardest hit town. The entire planet. I showed you that at the beginning. And he co-hosted the Fukushima Daiichi plant. A small area was opened in 2022, and about 100 morons have returned to live. They're not there full time. Lying is just the only way they can win anything. They have to lie about every facet of the story too. The host town, Okuma, sacrificed part of its land to build an interim storage site where they're going to grow food with nuclear rubble and nuclear waste. I know that sounds crazy, but that's what they're doing. For nuclear waste gathered from the contamination, with 6% of its former residents have returned. They didn't sacrifice a part of its land. Like, what are you talking about? It's an abandoned community, and the only people that went back there were the victims of society, and the majority of the people are saying that the 100 is actually workers, the homeless, the destitute, the victims of society, the immigrants that don't speak the language. Conditions inside the Fukushima melted nuclear reactor is still unclear 13 years after the disaster, but that's not true. The circumstances and the conditions are very clear. The reactors and the fuel pools are gone. And each of the reactor cores, and there's around 9 to 10 reactor cores in each building, each reactor core is equal to at least 100 Chernobyls because it's pure uranium, pure plutonium. Japan marks 13 years since the massive tsunami disaster. A closer look at the Fukushima nuclear plant. What are they going to show us? A bunch of people. If you're going to show us a closer look at the plant, show us the plant. Show us the reactors. Is that asking too much? We haven't come across a story in, 8 years that showed us these pictures. It's usually one of those far away pictures, right? From a drone. 13 years after Fukushima nuclear disaster, Japan remembers the dead. The dead. Like, what are you talking about? Japanians don't remember the dead. They don't remember the death of the Pacific, for starters. They don't remember that in the first year there was 865,000 extra cancers. They don't mention that. They don't mention there's 13,646 out of 38,000 children with thyroid tumors. They don't mention the massive deaths by heart attacks. They don't mention that 14.2% of neonates and infants have congenital malformations that have to be corrected through open heart surgery when they're born. That's 14,200 per 100,000 live births. They don't mention 6 out of 10 Fukushima children with diabetes. They're worthless. They're the worthless of the worthless. Japan pays tribute to the 2011 Fukushima nuclear disaster. Like, what are you talking about? They're sitting there in tuxedos. They're not paying tribute. And look at Uchibori with the glasses on to the right of Kishida. He's the governor of the Fukushima prefecture, a real-life monster, actually. A real-life demon. Open-air bookshop opens in a town affected by the nuclear plant disaster. Open-air bookshop in a town affected. The town affected. They're talking about in Okuma, which is 2 kilometers away from the ongoing nuclear meltdowns. And then they have the incredible contempt to describe it as affected. It's been abandoned for 13 years. If someone comes and burns down your house and everything is in your house, are you affected or are you a victim? This town is mostly still. No one should ever live there under any circumstances. And they're covering the secrets of Fukushima melted reactor, and they show you a book. Why not? Bear with me. Why not show us the reactors if you're going to talk about the reactors? Is that like asking too much? Uncovering the secrets of the melted reactor. Why don't you show us like pictures like this, the melted reactors? And then they stripped it down, there was nothing left. Why don't you show us that? And then tell us the secrets of the reactors. Oh, because the lie doesn't work if you do that, right? China demands Japan start Fukushima treated water compensation system. So Japan and China is working together with Taiwan and South Korea to promote the tritium fable. The release of treated. But like, what are you talking about, the release of treated? It's not treated. It's not treated. The tanks were full in 2013. And it wasn't from the reactor buildings. No.
But after just 2 years, the site is already jammed with more than 1,000 giant tanks. Most of them are already full up.
It was full of high-level radioactive water sucked up from the aquifer underneath the site itself. The tanks were full. And if you keep telling a lie enough, then the lie becomes the truth. But unfortunately, this is not a lie we can allow to exist. It's an unusual picture because they're showing you reactor 5 and 6 right there. You rarely get to see reactor 5 and 6. You rarely get to see reactor 5 and 6. The original pictures were all pixelated out of reactor 6. Reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4 are 100% gone. UN nuclear chief tells Japan transparency is very important. The ruined, which is a very unusual word, nuclear plants discharges. These are nuclear meltdowns, Rafael, Grossi. And the reason we got a poll is because of that particular attribute. Should the International Atomic Energy Agency's Director General Rafael Grossi be dropped into a volcano? I think it makes perfect sense. And if we dropped a bunch of Rafael Grossis into the volcano, we wouldn't be in the position we are today, right? I like it. Good idea, Dana. But the thing is, we don't want to do it fast. We want to just slowly, slow as we can, cook them like we cook a hot dog over a campfire or something, right? Wouldn't that be a better idea for people like that? And then we wouldn't have many people like that anymore that are destroying all the species and the future of all humanity. Look at the piece of shit there smiling like he has some redeeming qualities. The degenerate from the UN Atomic Energy Agency has emphasized to the Japanese government the importance of the transparency. They're the least transparent organization I've ever come across. And to call it treated, I can't bear it. I just can't bear it. Japan, the International Atomic Energy Agency, agrees to keep working together on the treated water. So the water, they said, is going through a filtration system. I'm surprised there's not 1 million people out there with a baseball bat with his name written on it. It's hard for me to comprehend it. That there's not even, I'm surprised there's not 1 billion people out there with a baseball bat specifically for the back of his fucking head. It's hard for me to comprehend it. You got any idea what he's got done to you? I'm not going to apologize for fighting for humanity and the 8 million species. Ever, under any circumstances. This is a monster, what we're talking about. These are monsters. They're real-life monsters. Monsters are actually real. And Rafael Grossi is the epitome of a monster. IAEA vows involvement until the end of the Fukushima water release. But the tanks were all full in 2013.
But after just 2 years, the site is already jammed with more than 1,000 giant tanks. Most of them are already full up.
So they were full in 2013. treat it. Should International Atomic Energy Agency's Director General Rafael Grossi be dropped into a volcano? World War II holdout Onada Hiro returns to Japan. This on March the 12th was that anniversary. This is a World War II veteran. That's him right there with the sword in his hand. He hid out in the Philippines in the jungles for 30 years, refused to surrender, and he had to bring in his former commander in order to persuade him to surrender. That's the mindset of the majority of the Japanese. They're obedient, stupid slaves, right? We should blame the Japanese for what's going on because they didn't hold their own accountable. They spoil it now for 8 million species. Caesar and other Japanese ways of sitting. That whole story is quite fascinating. Way back in the day, prisoners were forced to sit a certain way. It was a very painful way, right? And the idea was that when you're sitting certain ways, and there's certain ways where they're really bad, then you are unlikely to be able to spring up and attack somebody, right? And so when you were visiting, or when you had an audience with the so-called royalty, you had to sit in a very painful way so they didn't have to worry about you leaping up and attacking them randomly, right? But, what when a culture is too fucking stupid to build chairs, then it's too stupid to have nuclear power plants. Fukushima children affected by the 311 triple disaster. This is a school in Okuma, where the moron is growing food now. He's not the first one, but just another useful moron for the industry. This school has been there 13 years. I'm pretty sure they dusted off the stuff there because it ain't going to look that friggin' shiny. It's a nuclear wasteland, right? So imagine how stupid you are to go in and dust it off. And so the reality of it is that's probably not even the school. That's probably in Tokyo somewhere. And they're just saying it. International Atomic Energy Agency chief reassures the residents the treated wastewater discharge of Fukushima nuclear plant is safe. Like, do you got any idea what kind of evilness you got to be to suggest anything like that? And so you only need one person. You don't need any evidence. You just need Rafael Grossi flying around the country, staying in the best hotels, eating at the best restaurants, and showing up, and the media regurgitates whatever he says, and he moves on and flies first class and stays in the most expensive hotels and wears $5,000 suits, such, and the list goes on. And the fact that there's not millions of people with baseball bats trying to crack his fucking head open is hard for me to comprehend. It's very difficult to rationalize it. But I would imagine in the near future there's going to be 1 million people with baseball bats wanting to crack his fucking head open. International Atomic Energy Agency's chief reassures the residents. Like, think about what kind of fucking monster you got to be to do that. You got any idea what kind of monster you got to be to do that job? Like, you got to be a monster. And look at it. Look who wrote the article, no less. Mari Yamaguchi. Who does all the cover stories for Fukushima, right? A real life monster. Quality journalism. Like, what are you talking about? Quality journalism. You're destroying everybody's future for a paycheck, you piece of fucking shit. You worthless sack of shit. You monsters. All the media's that they're running with that story. If they're going to cover Fukushima at all, it's going to be that story. If not, they're going to cover the Ruski, just a distraction. Get you to worry about nuclear weapons. Don't worry about the biggest weapon of all, a nuclear power plant. No, don't worry about that. Japanese protesters doubt objectivity of the International Atomic Energy Agency and rally against the discharge of the Fukushima water, the tritium. They rally against the tritium. Oh, please don't poison us with tritium. And they're going to get the media. The media's going to run out and stick them right up there right away. They're perfect. Useful idiots, and there's lots of them out there. Schools near Fukushima Daiichi holds the first graduation ceremony. School near the Fukushima Daiichi. This is Okuma, where they got some children in a school. They got a school, they built a school there in a nuclear wasteland, surrounded by nuclear wastelands. And they got children going in there, the most vulnerable of society on top of that. The school reopened last April, we covered it, for the first time in 12 years. And it's in a nuclear wasteland. So it's a preschool education and a care center right by nuclear meltdowns, ongoing nuclear meltdowns, where there's 14 million one-ton bags of radiation in that community on top of that. Japan's a worthless fucking society, right? I'm not able to sugarcoat anything. I apologize. In the graduation ceremony, 2 ninth graders received their diploma. So 2 kids graduated. That's the principal. Can you imagine how fucking stupid he is? That he's the principal of a school right alongside of 2 nuclear meltdowns, and he's got to pass by 14 million one-ton bags to get to work every day. Do you got any idea the level of stupid you got to be to do that job? Like, the level of stupid, you want to see Rafael Grossi there, I can tell you that much. He's not stupid. He's just a monster. And a well-educated one on top of that. He's the principal of a school in a nuclear wasteland. Mom, I finally hit it big time. And they also offer preschool education and care. So let's get the most vulnerable of society in there so we can trick other people coming in there. If that's not a worthless society, what actually is, I wonder? So they returned from another city that's a nuclear wasteland to go into an even worse nuclear wasteland. People take part in a rally against the Japan ocean discharges of Fukushima tritium into the ocean. This is the United States. I guess they're Japanese in the United States. Protesting tritium, so they're going to put them in the media. Let's get them up there in the media. I got some morons down there protesting tritium. Send a reporter down, get some shots, and let's write a story. Yep, right on the go, boss. Thanks very much. I'll need a bonus for that. Japan's nuclear Fukushima International Atomic Energy Agency. The International Atomic Energy Agency's Director General, Rafael Grossi, is guided at a facility for sampling treated and diluted water to the sea from Fukushima. Well, he ain't gonna go over by the reactors. He ain't that stupid. He didn't get the job because he's stupid. He got the job because he's a monster, right? Because he's a degenerate. useless subhuman species, right? And these pictures, now that's all we've seen for the last 6 months, these versions. Hyping tritium content in Chinese nuclear plants, just an attempt to divert attention. What do you think all that change of color is you're looking at there? That's all runoffs from the site, by the way. You can count the tanks, there's maybe 750. Chinese experts, tritium. So if you're a nuclear expert and you're talking about tritium, then shouldn't you get the death penalty? Canadian nuclear laboratories to deliver a community update. Oh, bless their hearts. They love you so much. They love to poison you every day through the Ottawa River all the way down to the Maritimes. So they're going to have a live broadcast on March the 20th around 8:30 p.m. my time. Now, if I don't forget, we're going to live stream that. And we're going to challenge their lies as they're talking in real time. Chalk River's had 2 nuclear meltdowns here in Canada. The first one we recognized worldwide. And everything runs downhill. They're going to put 1 million tons in a above ground storage. It just doesn't even seem that kind of evil is possible, but yet no, that's what they're doing. Josh McAllister blasted government over new nuclear betrayal. Because Josh McAllister in the United Kingdom wants small modular reactors. And because they're not trying to build them, he calls it a nuclear betrayal. Yes, there really are people that stupid. Oh yes, America's newest nuclear warhead will cost just under $100 million to produce. $100 million for their newest nuclear warhead that they can't use. It sucks the lifeblood, all the precious resources of your countries. If they don't do it, NASA will take it and shoot it up into space, make sure nobody can ever have it, right? If it's from the United Kingdom, you know it's going to be a lie. That's the number one rule when it comes to United Kingdom. They're Rafael, all wannabe Rafael Grossis, these people. Collaborative projects safely disposing of over 1,000 drums of radioactivity. Safely. Again, you'd be insane to believe anything United Kingdom. And I don't know why they're so evil, but I think it's just that kind of inbreeding in the nuclear industry that was already mongrelized subhuman species. As they started interbreeding with each other, they didn't have any emotions to begin with, so when their children were born, they were void of any kind of human attributes whatsoever. Permanently dispose of more than 1,000 drums of waste. We don't know how bad the waste is. We don't know nothing. All we know is their legacy is horrific. It's unconscionable what they've done at Windscale. Or they changed the name to Sellafield because what they've done was so friggin' evil. You know, when they had the nuclear meltdown at the plutonium mixed oxide fuel facility, they went out to the theaters with buses and kidnapped the people in the back rows. That's 1957. Now, in 1957, if you sat in the back rows because you were very poor, because the wealthy sat up front back then, right? Because there's no such thing as the big screen TVs back then or something like that, right? It was just black and white at that. and they were very precious. Very few people had them in 1957. And so those who sat in the back row were typically the lowest paid of society. And so the nuclear industry didn't go to the universities to get nuclear students. They didn't go to nuclear corporations to get the experts. They didn't recruit the military. No, they sent in the victims of society. And every nuclear disaster, every nuclear accident is a catastrophic event. All the fuel pools are catastrophic events. When you pick up 30 million one-ton bags of radiation, 30 million one-ton bags of radiation, you are in the twilight zone. And they keep changing. These are files from the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA releases from the nuclear regulatory agencies. So 1 sievert equals 100 rem, 1 millisievert equals 100 millirems. The receiver, 3 sieverts is a lethal dose for a human, by the way, right away. But if you get a low dose, then it kills you later. The National Council on Radiation Protection and Measurements, the NCRP, which is the United Nations, estimated the annual equivalent dose to an individual in the United States is 6.2 millisieverts, 620 millirems. But what they're talking about is natural stuff. So it doesn't have the same attributes. You can't conflate it with anthropogenic man-made radiation. Of that amount, 3.1 millisieverts, 310 millirems, is from natural background sources, but it used to only be 100 millirems. Primary inhalation of radon, and of course we're acclimated to everything that's the stardust because that's what we're made of. We're acclimated to that through genetic superior selection, right? Same with all the species. That's homeostasis. Our body regulates it like a thermostat regulates the temperature in your house, or cruise control regulates the speed of your car, right? It has no adverse side effects. We can't bioaccumulate natural stuff. We can only bioaccumulate anthropogenic man-made radiation. And another 300 millirems is from diagnosis and therapeutic. There's no such thing as a therapeutic or medical procedures. Like, no, Dana, there is. The hospitals all do it. And like, what you're wrong. I'll show you you're wrong. I'll show you how wrong you actually are. So radiation therapy. And your doctor says your wife, your child, your loved one, yourself got cancer. And you're like, oh, doctor, please, must be something you can do. Well, yeah, if you sign this piece of paper that absolves the doctor from litigation, from any illnesses or side effects, we can do experimental radiation treatment on you. You're like, oh my goodness, thank God, doctor, bless your heart, oh, bless you, doctor. And so then they orders in a whole bunch of radiation, and they start murdering you in your hospitals. They do it everywhere, and everybody gladly goes down and gets it done to them. You can't even sue the nuclear industry after for murdering you or your loved ones. Introduction of radiation injury, another silent epidemic. Radiation injury. So you got a tumor, and they're going to go down to the hospitals, and they're going to pound it with radiation. And 6 months later, they're going to kill that tumor most times. Not most times, but quite a bit of the times. But 6 months later, you're going to have 10 tumors everywhere else. Radiation-induced injuries to the visual pathways. Radiation injury to the heart. Cardiac injuries following treatment for breast cancer from, you guessed it, radiation-induced. Radiation-induced kidney injuries. Radiation hypoxia from radiation-induced lung injuries. blood spinal cord barrier disruption, central nervous system, radiation injuries. So you can't get radiation treatment without a whole bunch of radiation injuries. And why we're still doing it to each other is, I can't comprehend it. Radiation-induced lung injuries, radiation-induced bowel injuries, laser treatment of severe radiation injuries of lower gastrointestinal tract injuries, radiation-induced kidney injuries, the breast radiation injury litigation. In other words, over 10 million women had their breasts removed in a decade that didn't have breast cancer. Because they're just trigger happy. It's big money. Easy money. And they're addicted to it. Oh, yeah, we'll take care. Yeah, come on in. Central nervous system radiation injury. That's when you run away the minute you hear that. Injury to cranial nerves or nucleids following proton beam, which is, why would you do that to your loved one? Radiation injury to the head and neck. The assessment of radiation-induced brain injury, brain necrosis. Radiation-induced regional lung injuries, small bowel radiation injuries, radiation-related breast injuries, radiation-induced gastrointestinal syndrome. Vitamin C uptake, by the way, may save lives after radiation. Radiation-induced brain necrosis, and with the videos we got, the testimonies from the families are just horrifying. And then people like Brzezinski, who has a cure, right? That works almost every single time, with no adverse side effects, works really quick. Don't have to kill everything in your body to see maybe an effect. Like the whole story of radiation as a treatment is bizarre. I don't know how the hell it made it this far. It does show you the control that they have on your universities and your media, though. Radiation-induced normal tissue injuries is normal. Radiation-induced rectal injuries, my favorite one. Spinal cord recovery from radiation injuries to the aorta and the branch arteries to your hearts. Patient with radiation-induced bowel injuries, radiation injuries of the central nervous system. I can't wait to get some radiation therapy. Tell you what, radiation rectal injuries sounds like a fucking dream, like a holiday, don't it? Radiation lung injuries, acute injury of the salivary glands during radiation therapy, radiation-induced lung diseases, liver diseases, radiation-induced bile duct injuries, radiation-induced experimental study on acute brain radiation. Experimental. It's all experimental. And there's never a cure. Why would you use radiation, though? Something that's completely foreign to your body. And that the reason you have most of these cancers in the first place is because of perpetual emissions from 1,000 fuel pools worldwide, from decades of unmitigated dumping. I mean, like, radiation-induced brain injuries. Did I mention radiation-induced brain injuries? There's so many studies on radiation-induced brain injuries. It must be a real thing, eh? Modifications, radiation-induced brain injuries. Brainstem injury after intensity modulated radiation therapy. Why do you call it therapy when it destroys your whole fucking body? How can you call that therapy? Because that's the only way you can trick people into going and getting it done. In Canada, they'll spend $900,000 on radiation. But if you want to get DCA or vitamins or something like that, you can go fuck yourself. And if it's your child, they'll take the child away from you. And a lot of places, majority of places in America, they'll do the same thing. They'll take your child away. They'll kill your fucking child with radiation. When your child is almost dead, they'll send the child home to die. It's unbelievable. Language decline after brain radiation therapy. How can you call it therapy with catastrophic adverse side effects that we're seeing? How does that actually work? See, I can't live in denial. I don't know how to pretend that is not happening. I'm not capable of lying to myself. I can't justify lying to myself. I don't know how to do it. Does that make me a bad person? How can you call it therapy with the absurd amount? How can we call it therapy, see? Hang on there. Studying radiation-induced brain injuries. Radiotherapy. It murders everything it touches, and you call it therapy. Radiation-induced brain injuries, did I mention that? Brain radiation injuries. There you go, that's a novel way of saying it. Clinical approaches reduce brain radiation injuries. Well, we just give them more radiation, Dana. When they die, they can't have a radiation injury anymore. Brain tumor progression from radiation injuries after cranial irradiation. Ionizing radiation-induced brain injuries. Thank God for radiation therapy. Oh, honey, good news, you're getting radiation therapy. Don't worry, honey. We'll get you some radiation therapy. Everything's going to be okay. No, Mommy, doctors are not monsters. Yeah, but all the kids in my ward died from the radiation therapy. Mommy, I don't want to get it done. Well, you got to get it done, honey. It's the law. The law says if you got cancer, I have to give you radiation. Canada, that's the law. They'll take your child from you, right? They'll take the child. They'll kill the fucking child with radiation. If you get child diagnosed with cancer, you might as well kiss the child fucking goodbye. And the government will get court orders to get their hands on your child so they can radiate the child until the child is fucking dead. And the real vulnerable children will go to university, get an education, and murder your child with radiation on top of that. Nuclear industry knows how to pick them too, right? Oh, so you want to be a radiological murderer. When I grow up, I want to be a mass murdering doctor who murders children in hospitals with radiation, because how disappointing is it? I wanted to get an education and slowly have your hopes and dreams beat out of you, and you spent 7 years in college and university. You get your degree, and now you got to murder everybody with radiation. You're too fucking old to go do it all again in another education. You just got to suck it up and murder everybody. And if you resist it, they'll take your license away from you. And then the world sits in silence and lets them do it to you. The world sits like cowards and lets them murder you. And anybody speaks up, there's a whole bunch of censors. There's people that will censor me for free, just as a favor to the nuclear industry. There's people that are attacking me for free from the nuclear industry at all kinds of fake accounts. And anybody who looks me up who don't know me, looks me up, will find all those videos hating on me, portray me as some kind of monster. They'll never watch the video of me. They'll watch videos of the monsters and get their opinion from them. I don't understand it. I can't comprehend it. It's not how I work. I don't think that way. I don't betray. Radiation-induced eye injuries in dogs. No, they don't know exactly what they're doing at all, Dana. Surgical treatment of radiation injuries of the colon and rectum. That sounds like a fucking hoot. Microwave radiation injuries. I actually done a presentation on my last site of cell phones and cell phone towers and stuff like that. I'm touching buttons again. Summary of symposium on acute radiation-induced injuries. I got a button for that, I think. I'll try to do it. Apparently not. Microwave-induced, radiation-induced skin wounds. Late radiation-induced rectal injuries after treatment of a carcinoma of the uterus. And so you're going to get one radiation treatment, and now you're going to get all these radiation injuries. You're going to get radiation therapies like you're getting fucking fucked royally, and the rest of your life is going to be miserable. Radiation-induced chronic arterial injuries. Several decades after radiation therapy. All kinds of... If you live several decades, it ain't going to be any fun. Don't worry, they love you. They love murdering you. You're no different than a fly to a child. My question is, in the last 30 or so years, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission released numbers for background radiation exposure to the U.S. population has risen by 100 millirims a year to the current 620 millirims a year. And this was after Fukushima. This is a Freedom of Information releases. For comparison, the radiation doses from a jet airplane flight is 0.5 millirims per hour in a year. After, from a chest x-ray, 6 millirims. From living at an altitude of 1 mile at 50 millirims a year. These got nothing to do with anthropogenic man radiations or nuclear accidents. But because they conflated it, and they keep regurgitating it, even those that think they're smart have fallen for this Ponzi scheme. My question is, in the last 30 or so years, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission released the numbers for background radiation exposures to the U.S. population has risen from 100 to the current 620 millirims. Radiation dose levels. But because they're conflating natural and anthropogenic in the same equation, then it means nothing, right? Because you're... You know, like if I got a gas station and I dilute the gas 60 to 1. So for every liter of gas I put in 60 liters of water, and you pump it in your car and you drive about a quarter mile down the road and whatever was in your fuel line is burnt out, and now you got nothing, basically just water there, and your car breaks down, and after a week every fucking car that got gas there is broken down. And the roads are blocked up for miles and miles of broken down cars. And the police, you go to the police and say, well, you know, we got all these people out here, and it's legal. That's legal. They're allowed to do that. And you'll be like, no, that's outrageous. Of course they're not allowed to do it. No, they're with the nuclear industry. They're allowed to do stuff like that. That's coming in the near future for you. So easy to hold them accountable. If you had 1,000 people out there each day putting out a simple tweet stating the fact about how evil nuclear is, the nuclear industry will crumble in about 3 months. It can't even exist, right, with me by myself here. It's lost its mind because I exist. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission believes that half the population receiving this dose in a few hours or less would die within 30 days. The other half dies on the 31st day. Like, no one's immune to it. They're scum to even suggest something like that. Cesium-137 has a half-life of 30 years, most common source of gamma from radiation for nuclear weapons tests and reactor accidents. Yeah, but what about the betas and the alphas and the neutrons? And by proxy now the X-rays? The biggest byproduct of the fuel is curium isotopes, and curium isotopes need lead shielding 10 times thicker than the plutonium does, for goodness sakes. Yeah, gamma's naturally bad, don't get me wrong. But if you look at the experiments on the animals, the plutonium and the curium there is no survival ratio, right? Everything dies. And you all typically die of the 3 tumors, right? When you get it into you, you're going to get bone or skeleton tumors. You're going to get lung tumors and liver tumors. And the majority of you will die from the skeleton tumors. Particularly the children, because you're mutating the stem cells on top of that. So when your planet is covered, this model I think is 20 days to your left and 21 days to your right. Of radioactive fallout of neptunium-239, by the way, which decays to plutonium-239. Alpha and beta particles outside the body are typically not a source of external exposure. No, because you got to breathe fucking air, you got to drink water, you got to eat food, you're going to get it in your body right away. If it's outside your body, it's only a matter of a few seconds before it's in your body. And so they like to say alpha particles can only travel a few centimeters through the air and cannot penetrate clothing or the outermost layers of dead layers of skin. Think of that statement, huh? It gets in your body, it's pulsing energy at the speed of light, 186,000 miles a second. It's wrecking your chromosomes, your DNA, your cells non-stop for your entire life. Your body has to repair everything that is damaging every second, and it also has to try to build a tumor around it. And so, there's nothing blocked by radiation suits in a nuclear accident, because first off, like the heavy emitters are going to drown out the singles of other radioactive isotopes. Internal radiation exposure occurs through the inhalation of airborne radioactive material. And you know that the Nagasaki Hiroshima victims, they were denied medical help and health care for 73 years because the nuclear industry says there was no way anybody ingested anything. Which is one of the most insane statements imaginable, because you atomize an aerosol and ionized and radiated animals and humans and structures. It was impossible not to breathe it in. And it's just that, that kind of contempt, right? And that most of the regulations worldwide are based on the Japanese Nagasaki Hiroshima victims, which is a low dose compared to nuclear power plants that are hemorrhaging from the fuel pools that are splitting atoms of every imaginable isotope all day, every day into the ecosystem. It's a catastrophic event. I just think at some point we got to do something, don't we? International Atomic Energy Agency admitted on June 2nd, 2011, there is no such thing as a safe level of radiation. There is no such thing as a safe level of radiation. A man-made radiation. And that the standards are based on natural, not anthropogenic man-made radiation. So, how is that even possible they can exist for that entire time when their models are based on natural radiation, not man-made? Because that's what everything they're doing is based upon, is natural stuff. Man-made is not allowed into the equation, see? How the hell did we ever get to that stage where that became normal now? Genocide is normal. And because no one challenges them, right? The International Atomic Energy Agency admitted that the standards that they're using are based on benefit, not safety. There is no benefit to anthropogenic man-made radiation. this was a video. I shot it, unfortunately, in 4K. But today we got fog. There around just before supper. The fog showed up, and it's blowing heavy winds. And I'm just going to move through the video manually because it's in 4K. It's just going to stutter. You can see the trees moving. But, like, you can't have fog in wind. You know, because I grew up on the ocean. I come from a community that still has no automobiles. And there's only 59 people living there today. A very tiny town. 400 years old. And everything is based upon the old way. And so we would pray when there was fog, and we're on the East Coast, where we get the Guinness Book of World Records. You get an average of 122 days of fog a year, just the most anywhere in the world of fog. So I'm very used to fog, right? And one of my jobs was to spot the markers that we left out. So when there's heavy fog, and you're using a compass and an alarm clock to go offshore and then find a buoy that you left in the water the day before. It's quite the trick, right? So you would pray for 5 or 10 kilometers of wind. And because you're in the Atlantic Ocean, you really didn't want much more than that. And because typically down here, most of the time it's a 30-foot groundswell out there. And that's what I worked in all the time. It was normal. There's the land. Where's the land? Wait for the next wave to dip and come up. And now, there's the land again. And you do that all day. And so we would wait for fog. And if you got 5 or 10 kilometers of wind, the fog would immediately lift and would just part like, it would just disappear. It would just literally, like cotton candy, would disappear. And then it was really easy to spot your marker. Now we have high winds and fog. This ain't fog, is it? This is chemtrails. And chemtrails, of course, they've been doing this for so long, people still are completely naive. You know, America has 134 ski resorts that chemtrail the sky to make it snow. Beijing, for the Olympics, had spent something like $40 million to chemtrail the sky so they can have snow for the Olympics because they never had any snow. They chemtrailed the skies over Vietnam with and made it rain so much that it washed away communities. It made the monsoons last an extra 6 weeks and washed away communities where they figured the Viet Cong were hid out in. But you're not supposed to have fog. Right? You're not supposed to have fog. And the fog didn't leave any moisture on anything. So you know it's not fog when it doesn't leave any moistures, right? So nothing got out of the plant. That's the official story, right? Nothing got out. But they picked up 30 million one-ton bags. Yeah, but nothing got out. Science outweighs irrational reasoning. Irrational reasoning. And the author is a professor at the Department of Nuclear Quantum Engineering at CAS, which is South Korea, very prestigious institute. And he said the tanks only got 2.2 grams of tritium because nothing got out, everything is in the tanks. And the discharges in total is equal to 3 grams of sugar. But this is a professor of quantum and nuclear engineering. And what we've noticed, like say the last decade in particular when it comes to Fukushima, was that a professor is the worst creature you're going to come across besides Rafael Grossi. So they're saying nothing got out. Despite the fact 30 million one-ton bags were picked up, nothing got out. Well, some people say 60 million bags were picked up. Hello, 60 million one-ton bags.
There's about 60 million tons of contaminated soil that's being stored, planned to be stored, outside the Fukushima Daiichi perimeter fence.
So 60 million one-ton bags. But the Fisher story is just 2 grams. 2 of those got out, basically. But we know the tanks, we know all the tanks were full by year 2.
Already jammed with more than 1,000 giant tanks. Most of them are already full up. At least 400 tons of new water pours into the site every day, and it's going to continue for years and years. Fukushima's water crisis has only just begun. Rupert Wingfield-Hayes, BBC News in Tokyo.
So all the tanks were, that's Rupert Wingfield-Hayes, by the way. There he is up there. Look, he's at the top of Reactor 4, which doesn't exist, in 2013. So they need to buy him off because he's out telling stories. He's out telling the truth. You can't have that. Like, Reactor 4 really doesn't exist. There is no Reactor 4. The fuel pools in the reactor core is what I'm talking about. I mean, you picked up 30 million one-ton bags, and that 14 prefectures were banned by 55 countries for a decade. And International Atomic Energy is like, no, Mr. Dana, no. Nothing got out. This is why we got a polling rate. Shit. Dropped into a volcano. And there's only one answer. But of course, Mr. Dana. Drop that piece of shit into a volcano. Drop it right now. So we got, close down the poll. We'll call it a night. Worked like a dog all day to put the show together, and now I'm so burnt out, isn't that funny? Should the International Atomic Energy Agency's Director General Rafael Grossi be dropped into a volcano? Well, yeah, of course, Dana. Well, thank you very much. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Rock and John and Colette and Albert and Dana Nasana and AA. Oh, excuse me. Albert and Joey and Stephen Young. Hi, Stephen. And John Shiflett. Good night, everybody. Oh, James Lucid is out there somewhere. Starlight. Names to shout out. Port Angeles, and Polly, and if I miss anybody, my apologies. Charles Sands. See everybody on the other side. Have a great night, folks. Take care.